Hello and welcome to another episode of Just Jets, a very special edition of Just Jets. Why? Because it's episode 200. I've done 200 of these Just Jets programs. It's been going on for a few years now, and I appreciate the support so much. I am your host, Matt O'Leary. We have a lot to get into today. It wouldn't be a Jets podcast episode without some much needed criticism, and coming off of a deflating loss to a divisional opponent, like it almost fits too good for episode 200 to come this week. It's been the perfect analogy for when I started covering this team on YouTube in particular. I mean, really, I would say from 2018-ish, that 2018 season was like kinda when I was first starting, really all invested in it, 2019 and beyond. So right in time for the Adam Gase era, and just as you would have figured, well, things are going really poorly. So we're going to talk about Aaron Rodgers not coming back in 2023, a very bizarre future for this New York Jets team, and of course, answer your voicemails. But before we do that, a word from our sponsors over at Manscaped, baby. All right, Merry Ballmas from our friends over at Manscaped. The holidays are approaching, but what if I told you the celebrations are starting early this year? It turns out the perfect gift does exist, and who else to bring it down your chimney than the leaders in below-the-waist grooming? Keep calm and let your balls jingle this holiday season with Manscaped's brand new Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, featuring the new Lawnmower 5.0. Watch all your wishes and mistletoe kisses come true. Look nice when you're going naughty by going to manscaped.com and use our code JETS20, that is JETS20 for 20% off and free shipping. Unwrap the gift of smoothness this season with Manscaped. They've been a big supporter of mine as a sponsor of this podcast for a long time, so I appreciate Manscaped, and I appreciate you listening as well. Use something nice over at manscaped.com with my code JETS20. All right, let's hop into this episode because, as I said, naturally, it can't be just this team lost to a divisional opponent. No. It is never that simple. It's not just, they lost to their division rival. It somehow is much worse than that. So the Jets got you excited. They did. They let us right into their damn trap like they always do with this team. All right, so the Jets against the Texans, remember that not that long ago, the Jets put up 30 points on offense in a half. And it was, what the hell is going on with this team? They scored 3 offensive touchdowns. That's allowed. You can do that. 2 touchdown passes, a rushing touchdown as well, right? Like, how many times have we seen that from this Jets team? Not in a long time, unfortunately. Not in a very long time. And then they follow up a 30-point offensive performance with a big fat ol' goose egg, a 0 spot. So I guess let's start with the Rodgers return, and then we'll get into the complicated future. But the Rodgers return is a story that came out just yesterday, so not necessarily having to do exactly with this Miami Dolphins game, but it kind of ties in well to it and why it's a complicated future for the New York Jets. So Aaron Rodgers goes on the Pat McAfee show yesterday. He goes on and he says that he will not be playing in the 2023 season. Well, he didn't even really flat out come out and say that, but his words like, hey, I'm not at 100%. If the Jets were still in the mix for a playoff spot, he would have pushed to come back. At this point, he should be 100%, his words, in a few weeks, roughly by the start of the playoffs, which just gets you that much more aggravated because Aaron Rodgers could have made a historic comeback if the Jets stayed in the mix. Unfortunately, they were unable to do that, and he's going to not be activated and not start for this New York Jets team, which makes sense, right? Because as we said here, if you're out of the mix for the playoffs, why put yourself or put Aaron Rodgers through that? That doesn't make any sense. The bigger thing is what he said after it was I won't be playing this year in 2023. He is coming back to the New York Jets in 2024, and it sounds like he is playing for not only 1 year, 2 and beyond. He feels rejuvenated since coming to the New York Jets, this passion that he has, and his plan is to play multiple years for the New York Jets. So more than likely will be the quarterback in 24 and 2025. Beyond that is a guesstimate, but I think the Jets are planning, and Rodgers is planning, that he will be here for the next at least 2 years. That is where things begin to get a little bit complicated with Aaron Rodgers' return, because then you go into, and this is maybe the next place where we can go, the complicated future for the New York Jets. Matt, why is it a complicated future? That you just said Aaron Rodgers is coming back, and while I am happy about that, I am glad that Aaron Rodgers will be back with the New York Jets in 2024. I don't know if the GM or the coach are that guy. And now you could say, well, Rodgers goes down 4 plays into the season. They've had a ton of, injuries, but I am really, really sick and tired of the excuses at this point for both Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas. I said you lost a game 30-0 to your division rival in the Miami Dolphins just a couple of weeks after you were embarrassed by them in the first place, right? Like, you were embarrassed by them in the first place, and now you lose this game to a division rival. Fantastic. Great. 30-0 did not show. Not showing is an indication on the coaching staff, right? That is a big thing. But a big reason why they struggled in this game is why? The offensive line. The offensive line was horrific in this game against the Miami Dolphins. The worst it's looked all year long. And I know they've had a million injuries to it. I get that. But how about some numbers for this Robert Saleh and Joe Douglas duo as they are in their 3rd year in the division? The New York Jets are 3-14. 7 of those 14 losses have been by double digits, and 5 have been 20-plus point losses. They are not just losing in their division, they are getting blown out in their division. Blown out in their division. And again, I understand the injuries, but you look around the league and you see these other teams who did have significant injuries. For instance, the Cleveland Browns are starting Joe Flacco, who they signed off the street. Remember Joe Flacco? But they're missing multiple offensive linemen. They lost Deshaun Watson, who they pay a ton of money to come in and play quarterback. They lost their best offensive weapon in Nick Chubb, and they are still finding ways to win games. Why? Well, they have more talent at other areas that you could make that case for the New York Jets. But also, their offensive staff isn't an absolute joke. That's a big help. The Jets' offensive staff is a joke. And one of the things that Robert Saleh, I think, needs more heat on, and when looking at this 2024 season, more blame should go towards Joe Douglas than Robert Saleh. But Robert Saleh, this is the offensive staff that Robert Saleh put together is not a good one. And Woody Johnson very clearly meddled in trying to get Mike LaFleur fired, and he was the scapegoat for last year. You bring in Nathaniel Hackett, and Hackett without Aaron Rodgers is basically Adam Gase 2.0. But then you bring in Todd Downing, a failed coordinator with the Tennessee Titans, and Keith Carter and all of his flaws in here. And Keith Carter, I think, is a big reason for these offensive line injuries by how they practice. You've heard how many veterans have come out against Keith Carter now, specifically the most famous one, Taylor Lewan, talking about the injuries and how the line was banged up. And by the year's end, everybody was banged up because of the practices they've been running for months and months and months and not playing into resting the vets. And guess what? Now their offensive line is all banged up. But it is truly remarkable for someone like Joe Douglas, who, as I said, he's going to be back. One of the things that I keep saying Robert Saleh. Why? Aaron Rodgers said in this Pat McAfee show appearance was his faith in Hackett, Saleh, and Douglas. Reading between the lines, I would say there is a really good chance that all three of those guys are back there. Joe Douglas, Robert Saleh, and Nathaniel Hackett. This is not me coming on here and saying that that is the right decision. This is me coming on here and saying, look, I think this is the reality of what the situation is and that these guys are going to get, brought back. And I understand, the rebuild with Joe Douglas and the injuries and that. He's 25-55 as the general manager. If he's back next year, which he more than likely will, he's going to have 100 games as the general manager under his belt. Look, I'm not saying it has to happen overnight, but I think we've been pretty patient as Jet fans. It's been, don't count the 2019, but he had a 2020 draft class, 21, 22, and 23. That's 4 draft classes and 4 free agency periods that were on him. And the team has missed the playoffs every single time. And again, I understand this year with Aaron Rodgers as the caveat. And that's probably why all these guys are getting a pass for this season. Aaron Rodgers goes down 4 plays in. But I think it is a legitimate criticism of Joe Douglas for this offensive line, because it's year 4 and they have not been remotely close to having a capable offensive line. When he got here, he told Sam Darnold's parents in 2019 that he was going to fix the offensive line, and that was his biggest thing. He's a former offensive lineman himself. That's supposed to be his strength. It's obvious. It's his biggest weakness. It is his biggest weakness as a GM, not being able to build up that offensive line. He was the first round pick on Mekhi Becton, and I'm happy for Mekhi that he's been, for the most part, healthy this year and played in 14 of 15 games or 13 of 14, however many, 13 of 14. But you missed 2 years from him, and he's played himself into a spot where you cannot re-sign Mekhi Becton. So that's a wash. That's a miss. Zach Wilson is a clear miss, no matter the mental gymnastics that people will go to say that Zach Wilson has zero blame for anything going on with this organization. And I get it, Zach Wilson dealt the perfect of hands, but again, the mental gymnastics for some of these guys, and Zach Wilson, Robert Saleh, Joe Douglas, for what they've actually shown on the field over the last 3 years is flat out insane to me. They, on the call to Zach Wilson, they said, we're going to lift you up, not the other way around. And year after year after year, the offensive line is still not good enough. How? Their plan this year, like you could point to, and we're going to get it. I know the comment section all too well. I know what's coming. They're going to say, well, you can't plan for losing however X amount of guys on the offensive line. But you know what you can plan against? Your plan A on this offensive line was Dwayne Brown at left tackle, who is a Band-Aid fix in his late 30s, barely holding on, wasn't even that good last year when you brought him in after an emergency when Mekhi Becton was lost for the season. And then, oh yeah, by the way, mentioning Mekhi Becton, he's your plan at right tackle. The Jets they gift wrapped Dwayne Brown the job. They said there was zero competition. And that's a big problem with the staff and this regime in total. They don't have any competition for anything. They hand these jobs to these people, unless you're Sauce Gardner. For some reason, Sauce Gardner has to go above and beyond to win a job, but it's mainly veteran heavy is the point. But Zach Wilson never had any competition for either a starting job as a youngster or even as QB2. There was no QB2 competition. Tim Boyle's the competition. Please, let's be real here, folks. That is not a competition. But going into a season where you have, winning expectations, your tackles are Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton. That's why people like me, I was critical of the Jets not doing enough on the offensive line. I said the offensive line has high variance this year. High variance was the word that I used. Go back and watch old episodes. I said there's a chance if they all play to their potential and their ceiling, they could be really good. But there is a lot of injury risk with this line with Dwayne Brown and Mekhi Becton specifically. Both those guys hurt, miss time, ineffective when in there. You lose Connor McGovern. You lose Joe Tippmann for a time. You lose AVT for a season again. Like, there is no excuse. The Jets have to put so many resources into building up the offensive side of the ball in the offseason. Offensive line and more wide receivers. And a real QB too. Those are like the three biggest things that the Jets have to do. Yes, like Bryce Huff extension would be something that I'd love to see. You got to figure out what you're doing at safety, right? Because Jordan Whitehead's a free agent. Maybe you're restructuring Mosley, and there's some other guys on defense that you could restructure and play around with. Special teams, okay, like are you bringing back Morstead and Zerline? They should. Ash and Dave, like there are some questions and some things you have to figure out, but that is so far down the list in the pecking order. It is figure out what the hell you're doing on the offensive line to revamp it, and what other weapons at the wide receiver position are you bringing in, because it was an abject failure from Joe Douglas there. And Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh are going to get a pass for it this year. They are coming back next year. But the pressure is cranked all the way up. I cannot stress enough the scrutiny that's going to be, or the lens, the microscope that they are going to be under. They're going to get a pass for this year. They're getting a long leash. I don't want to hear, again, another thing, another narrative that I don't want to hear is that the Jets move off of guys too quickly. Because if any other organization, Zach Wilson is not getting 30-plus starts with how he's looked in his career. That's an insane leash. An insane leash for someone who has performed as poorly as he has. Joe Douglas, again, 25 and 55. That's 80. That's what, 80 games? He's been the GM for 80. And to have a winning percentage as low as he has, and to still be here. And Robert Saleh and his winning percentage. And once again, I understand the caveats that are going to be pushed, the pushback that there's going to be. Well, Joe Douglas had to do the teardown, and well, there was the injuries, and that. I am just so done with the excuses. So it is a complicated future for the New York Jets. It's not as easy as, oh, they're just going to run it back and pretend 2023 never happened. You know, the Men in Black meme where you hit the button, bink, and your memory is forgotten, and everything's fine, and you're going to go in. There is immense pressure on Joe Douglas and Robert Saleh, as there should be, because the Jets clinched the longest active playoff drought in all, like another year of it. They've had it forever, right? It's the Jets and the Buffalo Sabres with the longest active playoff drought in the four major sports in North America: NHL, NBA, MLB, NBA. You know, the whole not NFL, all of it. They have the longest, 13 years. So I saw a trend going around on Twitter. I saw it first from Jets Today, so I quote tweeted it, and it was a picture, right? It was a challenge of show yourself in 2010, the last time the Jets made the playoffs, versus now. So I did it. You know, I play along. I like doing those things. I think it's fun, and it's a good way to, you know, we're all in this together. And going as a 15-year-old to a 28-year-old, you see a difference. But the ones that were so jarring are the one when you have people literally growing up over the time in a playoff drought. There was people sending me pictures with like this one guy holding his baby, and then like now he's fully grown. He's like 6 feet tall and like standing next to him. Or there was one of two young kids that was tweeted at me, and it's like the youngest one's starting high school next year, and the other one's driving, and they're like infants and toddlers. The amount they are just so inept, and it is so frustrating, man. It really is. I truly can't believe it. But the playoff list streak has to stop. And I don't think it's asking too much from either Joe Douglas or Robert Saleh. And if they don't make it next year, I don't want to hear any excuse. I don't care I don't care about the injury excuse or anything else. You have to find a way. It is your job to find a way. You're paid millions and millions and millions of dollars. You've had a leash for Saleh would be 4 years, and Joe Douglas will be going into year 6. Figure it the F out. Let's get into voicemails. We have a lot of voicemails to get into. Had a ton of calls. Unfortunately, not able to get to everybody. If we did, we'd be here all day long. We got I think I'm able to fit in 10 or 11 calls in here we're going to go through. We will start things off with Connor from Long Island. Wants to talk some Zach Wilson and some Rodgers Saffold. All right, let's do it, Connor.
Hey, Matt, this is Connor. I've called into your pregame show a few times as of late. I'm calling from Long Island. Just a few things to touch on from today's putrid performance. I mean, there were no positives to look at. We had 3 yards of total offense in the first half. CBS actually put a graphic up with 1 minute left in the second half. We had 3 yards of offense. Rather, the Dolphins had 3 touchdowns and 5 sacks. They had more sacks than yards of offense we had, and the same amount of yards we had, they had that amount of touchdowns. I mean, it was just terrible. The O-line has been remarkably bad all year, but this is the worst the O-line has ever looked. I mean, and when I don't even know what to believe. The reporting this year has not been at its best. Zach coming out because he's dehydrated, then it's ruled a head injury, but not a concussion. I don't know. I think it might have to do with something reluctant to play. When I saw him walk off that field, I didn't know if I'd ever see him in a Jets uniform again. I mean, has anyone checked on Rodgers Saffold? I mean, he is better than every lineman except Tippmann on that line. He's better than every one of them, and he's not active. Is he alive? And Becton, I was never a big fan of the Becton draft pick. I always wanted Lamb or Judy. I thought he was going to be a solid O-lineman, though, but I still didn't want him. He's been injured forever, and when he's healthy, he's getting false starts, holding, and bad blocking. I mean, and one last thing to touch on before I let you go. DJ Reed had a very difficult time keeping up with Waddle as he went for 140 yards and a very long touchdown. I mean, imagine if that was Tyreek Hill. He would have had 250 yards and 2 touchdowns. All right, thank you, Matt. Have a good rest of your show.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate it. Connor's been getting involved, throwing his name in the hat in the Jets content community. He's, as he mentioned, he called in a couple, I think the last 2 weeks to the pregame stream. I know he's checked in on Jets Talk, and I had Jake Asman on a couple days ago while I was editing, and I saw his call into the Jake Asman show. Really love to see a young, knowledgeable Jets fan, and shout out to you, Connor, because I love what you bring to the table. Clearly a smart and knowledgeable young football fan, and I'm sorry for you haven't gotten any of the fun Jets years, and I'll say fun in air quotes because even people my age, I'm 28, I haven't seen a Jets Super Bowl, but at least growing up in the early 2000s is when I started realizing what the hell's going on. I remember 04 playoffs, 06, 09, 10. That's 4 times I remember my team in the playoffs, and 2008 was a fun one, even though they didn't make it. But just getting back to the main point of this call from our guy Connor here. DJ Reed had a tough one. I wish they weren't so stubborn and would travel Sauce Gardner around. And let's be honest, DJ Reed didn't have a good game, but Reed has been stellar for the New York Jets over the last 2 years. He's played what close to 30 games now, probably as a New York Jet, and he's had 2 bad games. He's been great. Oh, that was the first touchdown he allowed all year, was the big one over the top. He got beat. He got beat. He had a really tough day against Jalen Waddle. There's no shame in that. There's no denying that that wasn't the case. He got beat. Sometimes you got to tip your cap. But why the Jets never adjusted and traveled Sauce Gardner over is something I truly don't understand. So they're blue in the face. They will tell you that that's not their way. They will not do it. And unfortunately, a lot of coaches, and it's true on the offensive side of the ball, and maybe it's just because the Jets have had specifically so many defensive coaches that in my mind, obviously I watch the NFL, but I watch the Jets with such a more hyper-focused look that I go to Jets examples first, but I could think of Mangini, Rex, Saleh, 3 defensive guys as head coaches. One of their biggest flaws is how stubborn they are to trying to do things their way and make it work their way instead of adjusting on the fly. Saleh's defense normally this year has been great in the second half of games. So they have been able to make some adjustments, right, earlier in the year, more specifically. But this is one where you're just letting yourself get beat by one guy. That Tyreek wasn't playing. Put your best against their best, especially after he was getting beat. That one is really, really frustrating to me. Really frustrating to me. It's crazy. And then the reporting on the Zach injury was just absolutely nuts. I appreciate it again, Connor. Let's go out to, we got Rob calling in from Long Island, wants to talk about the future of the New York Jets. All right, let's do it.
Hey, Matt, what's going on? Rob from Long Island.
How are you, man?
Just calling to, obviously recap what happened today, but, now looking on the broader perspective, is it just me, or is it kind of feeling like everything's a mess again? Just with next year in regards, banking on Rodgers coming back and no offensive line, got to get a receiver. It just feels like a mess all over again. I just wanted your take on the future now, like break down a little bit about what we can do to just keep on pace with some of these teams like you're watching today. The Bills dominating Dallas and San Francisco dominating, just some dominating performances. And like, how are we going to be there next year if that even is something that could happen? Thanks.
Yeah, I understand. Like, they just have to do a better job of putting pieces around Aaron Rodgers next year. I talked about the offensive line, wide receiver, a veteran backup quarterback. I would say draft a rookie quarterback to actually redshirt and sit, right? Because with the news that Aaron Rodgers is coming back to play another 2 years, Zach Wilson's contract is expiring after next year. He does not fit the timeline. You are not giving him a $23 million fifth-year option. Thank you, Zach. Fortunately, it didn't work out. Going to try to trade you somewhere, and don't give me the fear that he is going to turn into something somewhere else. Maybe he'll be Geno Smith. That is a 1 in a million shot that someone turns into a Geno Smith. But the same thing that people said about Sam Darnold, the Jets are going to rue the day they let Sam Darnold go. He goes to Carolina. Stinks is a backup quarterback. Stinks is harsh. I'm sorry. It's just frustrating with this team, but is a backup level quarterback. Zach Wilson, probably the same thing. Will bounce around as a backup quarterback for a few years before bowing out and having a nice career doing something back in Utah. But having a young rookie quarterback to sit behind 2 veterans and you take it from there. Talking mid-round pick. It doesn't have to be the first-round pick because, one, they need a weapon. Whether it's an offensive lineman or a wide receiver, whatever the hell it is, you got to figure out a way to improve there. But I understand the frustration. Hopefully they make some changes to the staff. Like, we know that Nathaniel Hackett's coming back, but does Keith Carter, Rob Calabrese, guys, do they have to come back? Does the running back coach have to come back? I don't think that's a necessity. Let's go to PG calling in from Long Island. He's got some frustration.
Hello, Matt. PG calling from Long Island.
What's up, man?
Mike Tyson has a famous saying that everybody has a plan until they're punched in the face. Well, apparently the Jets were punched in the face very early in this game because any plan they had went out the window. The coaches were able to make no adjustments. It was just a debacle. It's horrible. I mean, 30-0 to Miami, one of your rivals, division rivals, showed no fight, showed no ability to match anything that was going on. Offensive line was as horrendous as any offensive line I've ever seen. And sure, they have injuries. So do the Dolphins' offensive line. So
Yep.
I don't know what's going on. You pointed the coach, and obviously, the offensive line coach Carter. Maybe he's great. Maybe it's just they just don't have the.
Well, he stinks.
The studs to do the job. But I mean, Becton just was horrible, and He's one of our starters. It's frustrating. This season, obviously, he's out the window. All we can do is, try and develop some of the younger players and, hope for a good draft and some good off-season stuff and hope Aaron Rodgers comes back next year. But the one thing I will say is it just seems that the Jets consistently get out-coached. And, 30-0 to Miami. I mean, shut out after that 30 points in the second half last week. I don't know what to say, except, what they say. Wait till next year. I guess that's all we have going. All right, Matt, your thoughts on the coaching, I'd love to hear. Go Jets.
Yeah, they're coming back. I've defended Robert Saleh more than most, and the reason behind that is, one, I think how good his defense has played, but also I think it was I was overcorrecting for other fans giving Joe Douglas more of a pass when I think they should share more of the blame. Because before maybe the last few weeks, it's been a lot more heat on Robert Saleh and less on Joe Douglas, where I put for this year, I don't know how you can't blame Joe Douglas. To me, that he is the biggest blame for this season. So I'm not sure if this coach is the guy. I have no idea if this head coach is the guy or not. Oh, God. It's frustrating, right? Like, it's so because now you're running it back with this group more than likely, but you don't know. It's an unknown, and it's a question mark, and Joe Douglas is going into his last year under contract with the Jets. He's not going to be a lame duck guy, so you're going to extend him. I don't know what they do. I don't know what they should do. But it's the frustration, PG, is more than appropriate. They have not been good enough for a really, really long time, and it's an absolute joke. It's sad is actually what it is. It's legitimately sad. Let's go next up to Joe calling in from PA, and he wants to talk about falling into the trap. And guess what? I did the same thing.
What's going on, Matt? This is Joe. I'm calling in from PA.
What's up, man?
But I'm originally from East Rutherford, you know what I'm saying? So familiar with the Jets Giants my whole life. Listen, man, this has been more than abysmal to watch these Jets, man. Like, not the defense, respect to those boys. And I feel so bad to watch those boys go out every week and see nothing from it. And holy hell, man, this is hard. And this Dolphins game, like, I have friends who are Dolphins fans. My brother's a Dolphins fan. And I fell into the trap of the Jets blew out the Texans last week. And then they come out and I had the hope, like every Jets fan probably did today, that, you know what, you 9-point underdogs, boom, pow, like, we got a shot. And that was the shot in our own foots, because Jesus, man, it's hard to continue to watch this team, but somehow I just do, and I know what the outcome's going to be. I don't know how we do it. It's like us and the Browns fans, man. I feel like we've had the most testaments that we've been going through. Maybe the Lions, you know what I mean? Good for them. Yep. But holy hell! And what's worse is I became a Jets fan the year after franchise. So like they had his rookie year, and then their other year, and then went to the AFC Championships. That following year is when I
2011
was like, okay, I'm a Jets fan. I like the Jets, not because they won. Or they won those playoff games and went to the AFC Championship, because my dad got season tickets, and my ass fell for the trap, and now I'm sucked in with the rest of you guys. But just wanted to share my piece. First time caller.
Thank you, man.
Thanks, Matt. Hey, go Jets.
I appreciate it. Thank you so much for calling in and joining the show. We appreciate that. But hand up, I was there. You know why? For this week, because they put up points. They put up a 30 spot. There was the leaks and the rumors that Aaron Rodgers could get cleared this week. And if you listen to, McAfee today, they were going to give it a legitimate go this week if they won, and if they were still alive. They are no longer alive. Offense played well, and Miami was banged up on their offensive line. They were missing multiple starters. Tyreek Hill, their best player, was out. And not only did they lose, they lost by freaking 30 points. They got blown out. They got embarrassed. You really can't make it up, and that's a shame. I'm sorry that you missed the fun years, because 2009 and 2010, people who are fans of the Chiefs or the Eagles maybe, or these other teams that are in the playoffs all the time and winning games, they a year where they go to the AFC Championship game isn't thought of as like this monumental thing, but for us and for me, it is. I have very fond memories of those 2009 and 2010 New York Jets, and yet they came up short. They didn't win it all, but a 9-7 regular season team, an 11-5 regular season team that's what I got. I have those two teams. 2004 was good, a 10-6 year, won a playoff game. 2006, they also went 10-6 and was more surprising. 08 with Favre was fun until the wheels, came out with his injury, fell off with his injury, but it's really frustrating. And I fell right into that trap too, like a fool, like an absolute fool. Let's go to another first-time caller. Jerome from Savannah wants to talk his draft plan.
Matt O'Leary, thank you so much for taking my call. This is Jerome from Savannah.
How are you?
Wanted to begin by telling you are a great content creator, sir, and a very valuable member of the Jets fandom.
Thank you.
I discovered your channel back during the pandemic, and although I find myself very frequently disagreeing with you,
that's okay.
I think you're, like I said, a wonderful content creator, and I always look forward to your videos. So thank you so much for your contribution there.
Thank you.
I wanted to take a moment to do a little thought experiment. Let's say that Aaron Rodgers did not injure himself back in September against the Bills. What do you think the Jets' record would be at this point in the season? Because if you believe that record is any greater than 7 wins, I have some oceanfront property in Nebraska I can get you a great deal on. With this offensive line and the, let's say, limited capacity of Rodgers' lackeys, i.e. Alan Lazard and Randall Cobb et al., I don't know that there's a whole lot that would have been different at this point in the year. And I am afraid that we will be having exactly this conversation at this point next year. Because, again, if Rodgers is not a particularly mobile quarterback, and I don't know who would be at 40 years old coming off of Achilles surgery. I'm 42, and I can tell you that my mobility is not nearly what it was when I was your age, Mr. O'Leary. That playing behind this offensive line, he's going to, let's hope not, but he's in line for another injury of the kind that Zach Wilson suffered on Sunday, whether it was head, neck, dehydration, whatever it was. Still waiting to hear on that, I think. In any event, I think the Jets would be very smart, if you'll allow me.
Sure.
Draft a quarterback with the selection, presumably it's the 5th or 6th pick, by season's end. Take Jaden Daniels if he's still on the board. Who knows if Caleb Williams drops because of some such nonsensical controversy that Mel Kiper and company come up with and manufacture by April. And try to get started on what is inevitable, which is another wasted season because of bad quarterback play and bad offensive line play. If you take Joe Alt or the individual, I think his name is pronounced Oli Fashanu, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, or J.C. Latham, adding them to the roster, is that going to make the line somehow like that much better? I think it only makes the line better marginally so, and not enough to withstand, Miami and...
His 3 minutes hit, so he got cut off there. But interesting. Okay, so I guess not surprising, Jerome, as you said in the beginning of your call. I'm going to disagree with you. I don't agree, but I will say, everyone doesn't have to agree on everything. Number one, but you were respectful and very kind to me. You buttered me up really good before you got into something that I was going to disagree with. So I appreciate that rather than the name calling and the heated and sometimes way too personal comment section. So I'm going to respectfully disagree with you, Jerome. And I'll tell you my perspective. I hear where you're coming from on drafting a quarterback in the first round. And if those top two guys are off the board, Jaden Daniels is an interesting one. But I don't know why that would be the Jets' plan for in the first round. And then going back to, I guess I'm going to backtrack it now, but we'll come full circle in a moment here. I think the Jets are at least 3 wins better with Aaron Rodgers. At least. Atlanta game, you absolutely win with better quarterback play. New England, you absolutely win with better quarterback play. And probably I'll say the Raiders game, but you can make a case the Chargers won too, because the reason why the Chargers were able to score points, the Jets had Justin Herbert in hell that night. The reason why they scored was 2 of the touchdowns were right off of a fumble from Zach Wilson, where they gained possession inside the 10, and then another time where they were at I believe it was like the 50, where their possession began. So they didn't have to go very far on these drives to get in the end zone. I do think Nathaniel Hackett, with his flaws, is something that Aaron Rodgers would be able to overcome. And I think you're minimizing what an elite quarterback can do. And Aaron Rodgers is an elite level quarterback. We saw Joe Burrow with the worst offensive line in the league playing a Super Bowl a couple years ago. We saw Eli Manning on the 2011 Giants win a Super Bowl with the 31st ranked offensive line. A better offensive line helps. And if you are not to that level where you could elevate others around you, Zach Wilson and no other quarterback on this roster is, and most backup quarterbacks aren't, and someone like a Derek Carr level or a mid-tier starter, Baker Mayfield, Daniel Jones, whatever, they cannot elevate things around them and get to a point where you can win in spite of your flaws. Aaron Rodgers did that for most of his career. I mean, I must have Mike McDaniels. Mike McCarthy. Mike McCarthy's offense and that offensive line, they did not have a good offense. Billy Turner was his starting offensive lineman during his MVP years. So I don't buy that aspect of it. And then I was surprised to hear you go, they need offensive line. No one can perform under this offensive line. But I don't want to draft an offensive lineman. Instead, I'm going to go quarterback. And I understand you want a long-term answer after Aaron Rodgers. But I do think a Joe Alt or Fashanu is an absolute must because the Jets need 2 new tackles for no matter who is quarterbacking. And one of them could maybe be Elijah Vera Tucker if you want to move him out because it's probably easier to replace a guard than it is a tackle. But Mekhi Becton and Dwayne Brown will not be here next year. So whether it's through the draft, a trade, or free agency, you have to do whatever it is to find multiple starters on the offensive line. So I would absolutely take Alt or Fashanu. And I'm not saying don't take a quarterback at any point, but with Rodgers being here for at least 2 more years, I think you could take a mid-round guy, have him sit for a couple years, and maybe that's your answer. Or if not, worst case scenario, he's probably your long-term backup, like Mason Rudolph with the Steelers. You could then move up to take your guy in 2026, or you could take a quarterback higher in 2025, Rodgers' final year. I think they need their first-round pick has to be an impact player for the 2024 team. So we differ in philosophy, which, again, I understand why you disagree, and we don't have to agree on everything, but I appreciate the conversation, Jerome. I really do. Let's go out to Don from South Carolina next.
Hey, Matt. Don from South Carolina.
What's
Just
up, man?
calling. I'm not even going to talk about the game because it doesn't deserve our breath.
Fair.
I have some genuine questions. Not genuine questions. They're kind of jokes, but there's some slight desire for them to be true. So if I'm not mistaken, the Los Angeles Angels in the MLB drafted a pitcher with every single pick in the draft a couple years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
I think I heard that somewhere.
Yes.
How opposed would you be if we just attacked this draft and every single pick we just went up and down the line and just drafted best available? And then in the off season, we got QB2, a backup veteran, and then we got some names in free agency for wide receivers, and we just added some juice. Like, obviously, the chance of that happening is very slim because that's not how we draft. But I wouldn't mind, like, the most obvious, like, we need to address this need type of draft in the history. And also, my second question is, I'm Italian, so we're very superstitious people.
There we go.
I am a firm believer, as well as other Jets fans, that we are a cursed franchise. I think we need to go, and I think we need to bless this whole freaking organization building. I think we need to bring a priest in and sage the building, and I think we have the evil eye. I think we need to do something. I think, like, there's a curse in MetLife and the organization that, at this point, just bring some priests in and pray over the area and get some sage and some holy water and just get these demons out of here, because there's nothing that is going right for decades and decades and decades, and I'm tired of it. Anyway, enjoy your Christmas. Happy holidays.
Thank you.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Yes, you too. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays to you and yours. I appreciate the call. Now, I understand the sentiment there, or the thought there, with going offensive line and just going right down the board and go, okay, the Jets are going to have 7 or 8 picks in this draft because they're going to have at least 2 or 3, I believe 3 comp picks in the 7th round and like pick swap things. So 7 or 8 picks. If all of those guys are offensive linemen, not good roster building. You might say, well, Matt, that's their biggest need. Agree. But how many offensive linemen are you carrying on your 53-man roster? Probably 10. Probably 10, maybe 11. Not everyone you draft is going to be able to make your roster then, if you're carrying 10 or 11, because that's 7 or 8 guys plus anyone else who you are signing or adding. And how many of those would you think would be actual starters? Maybe you're hoping the first rounder for sure, and then maybe a 3rd or 4th round pick is probably a starter, but the chances of you getting bunches of starters in round 3 through 7, maybe you get 1 or 2 in that range. I think there are still other needs. Offensive line, wide receiver, heavy draft. I'm not saying ignore offensive line. I think in my latest mock draft, I'd have to go back and look, but I'm pretty sure I took 3 offensive linemen. That is, and the first pick was offensive lineman, and the 4th or 5th round I went back to O-line. But yeah, you have to load up on the line, no matter how you slice it. So with that much I agree with, but unfortunately with how rosters were constructed, and with the Angels, they have the baseball, you have the minor leagues, and you have guys in your organization, and they don't have to be on the 25 or 26 man roster, and it's not built that way. You have the practice squad, sure, but you have to go through waivers and all that stuff to make it onto the practice squad, and you chance losing those guys. There's only so many spots on the practice squad, so a little bit different, because in MLB there's multiple developmental leagues before you get to the MLB, where the NFL there's really not. So I think that's the biggest thing there. Let's next go to, who do we got next? Jay in Jersey. He's out on Becton. All right, let's do it.
Hey, what's up, Matt? Jake from Jersey. Just wanted
What's up,
to
dude?
say, to be honest, I've been a Becton truther. I have this whole time, but I mean, there's no value there at this point. I mean, there's no way you could re-sign this guy to an extension or anything after that last performance. I mean, it's not like it was just one game either. It was the past few games have definitely been rocky. I mean, could it be Tomlinson next to him, not playing well at all either? Sure, but nah, I just think he's gotta go. They gotta cut ties there. Well, they will. He's gonna walk at the end of the season. Hopefully they don't offer him a contract, but honestly, is there any way we save any money by cutting Tomlinson this year? I don't know when his contract is up exactly. I don't know if it's 1 more year, 2 more years. But if we cut him this year, I mean, I know it's like opening another hole in that line, but I mean, dude was also horrible yesterday. It's just crazy how bad this is. It's almost like that Adam Gates year bad. Like, it's just mind-boggling, honestly. And I don't know how Salah doesn't take, like, any credibility. He seems like a great guy, but I mean, like, dude, you gotta have the team ready to play somewhat. I mean,
it was bad.
That was like your last hoorah game right there to say, like, oh, like, we can still be something. You got the, rumors of Rodgers maybe playing and all this, but now they come out completely flat. I mean, you could say the D played, like, had some streaky good plays, and I mean, would they still drop 30 on us? It's, I don't know. We put up a big goose egg, right? I mean, it's just so pathetic. I mean, and honestly, the Wilson, like, quitting on the team thing, I truly don't think that's it. I mean,
no.
Honestly, he probably only hurt his career playing the rest of that game yesterday. I mean, he's just going to either get hurt physically if he didn't already, and then, I mean, how can you even produce behind the line like that? It's really insane. But hopefully we get a stud tackle in the first round of the draft, and maybe just take all offensive linemen and wide receivers as draft. I don't know. But as always, go Jets. Am I right?
Absolutely. I appreciate that. Thank you for calling in. It's totally fair. And by the way, I looked it up for our guy Laken Tomlinson. It's not great. So I'm with you. I'm out on Mekhi Becton too. He has not played well enough to bring back. But here's the numbers for Laken Tomlinson. If they were to cut him, he frees up $10.7 million in cap space. That's good. The bad news, twofold. One, $8 million in dead cap, so I don't know if they'd be willing to eat that $8 million, even though it doesn't count towards the cap. And you have to find yet another starter. So let's play the game for a second. You cut Laken Tomlinson, which I'm not going to sit here and bang the drum that you absolutely have to bring him back. I think he's probably back, but let's say you cut Laken Tomlinson. Then you have Joe Tippmann at center, AVT at right guard, probably, and have to find 3 starters instead of having to find 2 starters. And it's making it a little bit more complicated to do that all in one off season. Is it possible? Yes. Is it challenging? I think it makes it a little bit more challenging for you, but a good call there. That's for sure. Jake in NYC wants to talk some Joe D. Let's do it.
Hey, Matt, it's Jake from NYC. Firstly, congrats on 200 episodes. Obviously, it's very Jets that this is the content they gave you to work with on your 200th show. So congrats to you, bro. I just wanted to call in and talk about, like, the mediocrity that just runs so deep in this franchise. Like, Joe Douglas, I've been a fan. I can't defend him anymore, bro. Like, he just punted on the season the second Rodgers went down. I know we've talked about it ad nauseum. Rodgers going down, terrible luck. Terrible. There's no excusing it. It was rough, and it probably capped our ceiling for this season, but that's not an excuse to give up, man. And you see it, every other franchise around the league would have done something, anything. Like, yes, the Josh Dobbs thing is probably dead now that he got benched, but at least Minnesota tried when their quarterback went down. We didn't even try. Like, I get it. It's a tough situation. This is the only franchise where the second Rodgers goes down, that's it. That's the excuse for the year. It's built in. Everyone's safe. Everyone's coming back. You all keep your jobs because we have this built-in excuse. It's the only franchise that would accept that. Any other coach would have been fired at this point by the end of the year. Yep. And same thing with the GM, man. It's tough, but again, congrats to you. I just want to get your thoughts. You, and go Jets.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was saying in the start of this show, was that their leash is actually longer than I think a lot of people understand. Well, these things don't happen overnight. True. I mean, sometimes rebuilds go a little bit quicker. It helps when you hit on the quarterback, but also at the same time, like, it's been a long time. Like, Douglas rather has 80 games under his belt. He's going to hit 100 next year if he's here, which he will. It'll be 100 games. That's a big sample. And Salah's been 3 years. 3 years. And even if you just want to link them both up on that 3-year timeline, which I think is unfair. I think at absolute minimum for Douglas, 4. But it's still 4 drafts, 4 free agency periods for Douglas, and 3 years for Robert Saleh. And we're seeing same mistakes over and over and over and over again, which makes me question if they are the guys. As I said, quarterbacks can help hide things, so you got to hope that Rodgers does that next year. Dan from Atlanta, he's got a rant. All right, let's do this rant.
Hey, Matt, this is Dan from Atlanta. I called in with not really a question, man. I just want to rant.
Do it.
Can I rant, please?
Sure.
Where do I even begin with this team, man? I mean, Salah and JD, they have to go. I've seen enough of these guys. They have done nothing for this organization. It's been so bad, man. Like, I can't even deal with it anymore. Joe Douglas has a worse record as a GM than Mike McCagnon. That's so bad. And people praise him like he's this awesome GM. And same with Salah. Like, you have so many fans that want to keep him. They're like, oh, he's a good motivator. Like, I don't care, man. This team loses year in and year out. Last time I saw this team in the playoffs was 8th grade. I'm 27 now. Like, that's not okay. That's not normal. Like, no other fan base has to go through stuff like this. I'm just over it. I'm just so over it. And I don't know. Like, they got to fire everybody. And, I mean, if Rodgers doesn't like that, like, I don't know. He can go too. I'm just so over it. I'm so done with this team. I'm sure everybody else is, but I can't do it anymore. They broke me. They truly broke me. I'm usually pretty calm, cool, and collected about this team, but I just can't do it anymore. Another losing season. When does it end? When does it end, Matt? Please let me know. Well, anyways, just had to get that off my chest. Let me know what you think about this team. I mean, what else can we say about this team? It's just been so bad. But anyways, I won't use up any more of your time. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you for calling in and for letting the rant out. You gotta. Sometimes you just gotta do it. And, we hit on a lot of the things, but there's something you mentioned when you were saying you're in 8th grade the last time the Jets made the playoffs, and you're 27 or going to be 27 years old. It is remarkable how much has changed in the last 13 years and how many milestones people have hit in their life in between Jets playoff appearances. I was in 10th grade when the Jets made the playoffs. I'm 28. I'm going to be 29 years old in a few months. Graduated high school, college, got my first job, left that job to be a sports writer, left and pretty much started my own business creating content about this team. A lot has happened. A lot has happened. A relationship, family members lost, unfortunately. Like, just so much has changed. And yet the one constant, this team missing the playoffs and having losing seasons. You have every right to vent. Today is the episode 200 is perfect for a venting session. Speaking of episode 200, would it be a milestone episode without hearing from Travis from Ohio? Travis, what do you got?
Hey, Matt!
What's up, man?
Happy 200, buddy.
Thank you, my friend.
Long-time listener since day one, Ace. And so happy for you. You're the man. I think episode 6 maybe was the first time I called in. And you've put up with me for that whole time. Now 200 episodes. And it's longer than most of my other relationships, so I love you.
Thank you, man. I appreciate that.
Our biggest thing, like the Shohei Ohtani contract last week when he signed for that record-breaking deal. Full disclosure, I'm also an Angels fan.
Okay.
So I'm used to all kinds of disappointment, but guess what? At least I got a championship in my lifetime with them, and we didn't get one with him. And our 3 seasons with Ohtani, even though he's a freak, he's the man, two-time MVP. I don't think he finished the season healthy, and he didn't bring us a championship. So you see the correlation here. Like, one, I like pro teams outside of Ohio because
Nice.
for some reason. Two, just because you got the best player on the field does not mean that will get you to the promised land. You need them to be durable. And obviously looking at our roster for the past couple of years, I mean, we raved about AVT, how much we love him and his versatility and what a beast he is when he plays. So was Ohtani. Same thing with Rodgers. My God, I loved Rodgers even back when the Packers drafted him and thought he should have got Alex Smith's draft spot. But this year, he's Shohei Ohtani. So availability is the best ability.
Yep.
And, you know, that's why I keep shooting my shot with Mrs. Wilson. She's Mormon.
Hey, can't hurt.
Just kidding, buddy. No, I love you. I'm not kidding about that. Congrats again about number 200.
Thank you, man.
And, God bless this season. Just get over with so we can start talking about what kind of players we get in the draft. And that sucks with the expectations we had for this year. What, at one point we were the sixth?
It cut him off, but thank you, Travis, as always, a day one OG if there ever was one, and it's that time. And Shohei Ohtani with getting hurt, and with the comparison availability, the best is the best ability. They got to figure it the F out, man. Injuries have derailed this team the last 2 years. It can't happen again. There's no more excuses for this regime, this staff. Either side of the ball, figure it the F out. And also, by the way, you're running it back with Aaron Rodgers. Let's try to protect him. Let's try to keep him upright. Get as many offensive linemen in here as you can. We close out with Peter from the beautiful, beautiful Hudson Valley.
Hey, Matt. It's Peter from up in the beautiful but yet still wet Hudson Valley after yesterday's rainstorm. Still numb to the fact this terrifically flaccid Jets loss on Sunday to the Dolphins, being shut out 30-0. What a great feeling that was. Calling in now, been thinking about this game for the past couple of days and just this season in its entirety. Loving the fact that you're already into off-season mode and doing the mock drafts on Mondays. And, looking ahead to the off-season, since that's the thing that Jets always seem to win every year, quote-unquote. Obviously, I think if Salah and Douglas are retained at the end of the season, they need to cut ties with Carl Lawson, C.J. Uzomah, Dwayne Brown, start, getting the cap savings with those guys out of the picture, and possibly restructuring some contracts of guys who might be making a little bit too much. JSM, Mosley again, possibly, and others.
Agree.
And, once they do that, that gives them room to sign, veteran free agents as the new league year opens sometime in mid-March. But my question is this. With a 40-year-old Rodgers under center, the offensive line needing help, the interior defensive line needing healthy bodies, more help at wide receiver, maybe trading for Devontae Adams in the offseason, what's really going to be the incentive for any veterans to want to come to this team next year? Since obviously Salah and Nathaniel Hackett and guys are going to be coaching for their professional lives right now. If this team doesn't, have a winning record and make the playoffs, which has got to be the mandate in 2024, why would anyone want to come here and play for the Jets before they even have a draft to get, the rest of the needs filled? So that's my question for this week. Maybe you can give me some insight as to what, veterans are going to want to, see in the Jets and coming on board next year. And just want to say congratulations on 200 podcast episodes.
Thank you, man.
Here's to 200 more, and hopefully by the time you reach 250, maybe we are talking about a winning team next year.
Yes.
Let's hope, and let's go Jets.
Fingers crossed. Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you checking in with us. I hope by this time next year when we're creeping up on 250, right? Because 250 will be at some point in late November, December, I'd imagine. So hopefully it's a winning team, and trying to talk about, the rooting guide for playoff seeding rather than rooting guide for, there's an out. You're the 13th seed and got to find the way into the playoffs, or, rooting guide for losses and improving draft stock. None of that BS. But let's do the veterans. Why would veterans want to come here? I think there is some incentive with playing for Aaron Rodgers. We saw it with Dalvin Cook. Unfortunately, the Dalvin Cook signing was not a very good one, but Devontae Adams reunion, another wide receiver. I'm okay with trading for Devontae Adams. I don't, by the way. People are worried about giving up a first-round pick. It is not costing you a first-round pick. I can promise you that much. Potentially, my guess would be a third this year, and then the following year, maybe like a third or another mid-round pick. It's not the same as the Devontae Adams trade of a couple of years ago. It is actually completely different now as he's older, and the contract situation. They could absolutely work it out and get him in here. The Jets, remember, not that long, well, it is a long time, almost 10 years ago now, but they traded a fifth-round pick for Brandon Marshall. Slightly different circumstances, but I think you could do something similar. I think they would have a better shot on getting guys on the offensive side of the ball to play with Rodgers. The Hackett one isn't an appealing thing. And on the defensive side of the ball, like, players and guys around the league, they love Robert Saleh. He might not be a great coach, but they love him. And defensively, his scheme is a friendly one for cover corners and ones and defensive linemen who can get after the quarterback, and linebackers who can fly around. So I don't think it'll be as challenging as maybe some might think. But Rodgers might have to put away the Cobb and Mercedes Lewis toys, and let's not do the David Bakhtiari conversation, please. Let's hold off from that. I don't want to see him on the MetLife turf. That's going to do it for me in episode 200. I appreciate each and every one of you guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Once again, I'm Matt O'Leary. Subscribe if you're new. If you get the show in audio form, make sure to subscribe, leave a comment. It really helps out a lot. And if you're on YouTube, subscribe to the YouTube channel, leave a comment, share with a friend. Once again, I'm Matt O'Leary, and I'll catch you next time.